Okay, welcome. Good to see you here tonight. Thank you for coming out on this kind of wintry night, let's put that. So I'm Peter Krim, Director of the Global Public Health Program. It's my privilege to be able to introduce the speakers for this program and to note that the lecture series is co-sponsored by the Global Public Health External Advisory Committee, Institute for Health and Humanities, and with help and a grant from MCAT who do the filming. And we post these videos of these talks on our website. If you want to share that with other people, go right ahead. And then one other thing, I always like to ask you to sign up. Make sure you signed in if you're a student taking the class. If you're not a student taking this class, you should still sign in. The extra bonus for that is you get put in the lottery that we're going to draw the last day on who gets a free copy of my book on transnational mobility and global health. So tonight we're really very fortunate to have with us Joe Carlson. Joe is a student studying exercise science. He's a global public health minor, born and raised in Missoula, and as he points out, he had never traveled internationally other than Canada before last summer. So we're going to hear about last summer and what that meant to someone from Missoula who had only been to Canada before that. After several years of working, Joe decided to pursue education in the medical field. He hopes to go on to graduate school for chiropractic and physical therapy. He enjoys biking, being active outdoors, and his trip to India was a completely different experience, he says. And I'd just like to add that I've known Joe since he was a freshman. I had the good fortune to have him in the GLI seminar that I taught that year. So we've worked closely together ever since. I don't think it's revealing any secrets for me to tell you that he's one of my absolute favorite students. So please join me in welcoming Joe Carlson to the lecture.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate taking the time. I hope that you find it worthwhile. I had an internship experience in India this last summer. It was a 3-month internship, and as I wrote there for Professor Kern to point out, it was the first time I'd traveled internationally, really. So it was kind of a jump in the deep end, as it were, instead of taking like little tourist things here a couple weeks, there a couple weeks. It was straight into a third world developing country for 3 months. And also, it wasn't just a developing country, but I went to a little place called Loni, Maharashtra, and it is a small village. If you look on Wikipedia, it says 4,000 people. If you ask one of the people there, or if you're there, it's actually 40,000 people. And the density of the population in India is just astronomical when you come from one of the least populated places on the least populated continent in the world to one of the most densely populated places, densely populated continents in the world. It was just a real shock for me. My internship was at the Pravara Institute of Medical Sciences, and it was at the Center for Social Medicine specifically. They have a tie with a group called IE3 Global, which is who I did my internship through, and essentially they actually have a master's in public health, and they're working on a PhD in public health program at this little Center for Social Medicine. It is pretty small, especially this actual department, because the Institute for Medical Sciences is a lot larger. It's a really beautiful campus. These are some pictures that I took just while I was walking in between, like on my lunch or on my way to a posting. I was very familiar with this hall right here. And the interesting thing about their campus is that even the dormitory is like here. This is the second floor dormitory where I was staying, the main lobby area. They have doors with windows, but then if you go over to the right, the staircase is open to the outside. There's walkways that are totally open to the outside, and it seems almost pointless to have windows there when everything else is open. but it was a very beautiful campus.
It doesn't seem very densely populated by those.
Most of the pictures I took when there weren't a lot of people around. Because I call enough attention to myself being a 6-foot white male in a area where there are no white people, and they're not 6 foot tall, and they have hair. So when I was going through my initiation, they recommended try to blend in as much as possible. Don't call attention to yourself. And I thought, that's going to work really well. Here, let me put on a hoodie and cover up because I stand out like a sore thumb, literally. The main aspect of my internship was actually in public health. I was a rural health, specifically with the Center for Social Medicine. And they have a lot of outreach programs and really a really wide network. It's quite amazing. I was very stunned to hear about the history of the program because it was built off of the collaboration of a bunch of local farmers. Just local farmers who had the main founder, he actually only had a third grade education. And they were harvesting sugarcane, and they decided that they didn't want these land moguls to get all the money for taking their sugarcane, which they worked hard for, and they get a small amount for it. So I thought, well, let's just collaborate and build our own factory. And it expanded from there to education, to medical sciences. They started expanding to colleges, multiple campuses, and a bank. They started as just a little collaborative cooperation and grew into this bank which deals in millions and millions of rupees every year, or actually every day.
How long did that take?
Oh, they've been established since the country got its independence, which was 1985, I believe. I'm wrong on that. I know I'm wrong. Apologize. I know the day. It's August 15th. I was there actually for their Independence Day, and this is what I wore when they were celebrating it on campus. It was pretty cool. They had a whole ceremony and everything. But the different aspects of the public health that the department is involved with vary. They have a national institution which is called Childline, which is essentially a child abuse support network, or just trying to save children from either sex trafficking, use for getting money, so begging, and going around finding tourists and other people and begging them for money when it's really someone, coordinating all of that with the kids, and they're lying and saving them out of that. Part of that in the top right there was the initial building for essentially a safe haven for women and the children who were in these trades or who just needed a place to get on their feet. And that was the initial building, but they expanded since then, built a building which was behind me, which is a lot larger, and one to the right, which was used for feeding the kids. This is a painting that the kids did that was on that building, which was behind me from the top right. And this is actually an HIV housing for people who come into the hospital. This was on campus. And this is off to the side, which they recently built, and it's for HIV patients who are just found out that they have HIV and their families to come. So somewhere for them to stay because it's a large problem in India. Continuing on with that HIV, if you take a look in the top left, this is actually a campus. It's about 30 minutes away, drive on bumpy roads. And this is for children who are actually born with HIV. And it's a school where when I went, it was actually only during the summer break, so there wasn't very many kids there. But all these kids that you see here, some of them are the grandchildren of the founder, and some of them are just children who stay. And they just live there in their different locations. And actually these kids drew, like kids from before drew on the walls, if you can see the pictures up there, images of like the founding fathers and of important figures, and they were very impressive. I'm an artist myself, and I thought, wow, I can't do that. That's very good. In this bottom left, this is actually a medical outpost in a little village just outside of where I was staying in Loni, at Rahata. And in that same town, we went over and found a government-run child's feeding, essentially, and babysitting care. So these kids don't have the means to get food for themselves and their parents don't have the means to provide for them. Usually it's single mothers, and they bring the kids here, and the government provides them food and water and nutrients. I believe they only get one meal a day through the program, but it gives them enough for their daily needs. And so we got to go there, and the kids were just so cute. I went with some medical students who would go in and they'd do a check once a month with the kids to see, okay, do you have a cold? Here's some cough syrup. Do you have anything else? Okay, let me write you a prescription to go see the doctors in Loney at the hospital for free, which is really cool. They did that for actually some HIV screening patients as well. These are some pictures of that city where the daycare was located. I would not have been able to navigate anything because it looked like it was all just back alleys. But there would be cars that would drive down this, and you'd have to step off to the side of the road. Some of it wasn't even paved, as you can see down here. And one thing that I thought was really captured my experience in India is if you see that there's a nice house right next to a very broken down house. And that was evident in all areas of India that I got to visit, both rural and urban, where you would have essentially multimillionaires in the urban areas living right alongside people who had shacks on the road in the mud with cattle. So it was just a really shocking experience for me. And this top right and bottom left are pictures of a couple of the different rooms in that clinic in Rahata. The top right is an extra room which used to serve as one of their physiotherapy units, but because Loney was about 20 minutes away drive, no one wanted to come to the rural clinic because it was only 20 minutes away and they could get better service over there. So they essentially stopped using physiotherapy techniques in this clinic, which I thought was a shame because a lot of them needed it who came in. But most of what was done in these clinics was blood panels and testing for HIV screening, blood clotting, and hemoglobin levels because there's a lot of anemia in the population since it's primarily vegetarian and they don't eat a lot of meat. And so they have a lot of anemic individuals. Something that shocked me was, actually I don't think I have a picture of it. The doctor who would take, the lab technician who would do the blood clotting would use little capillary tubes. He'd take a finger prick of blood, and you're dealing with HIV, right? It's a bodily fluid transferred disease. And he wore gloves for the first time, but then after that, he took the gloves off and didn't bother putting gloves on. And not only that, but when he would test to see the clotting time within the tube, there's blood in the tube, and he would break it with his hands to see if there was blood. Quite shocking to me. There's a different level of precaution over there, let's say that. These are some pictures from essentially the secondary outpost for that clinic, which is even farther out, and in a more rural village where they would have, essentially they would recruit local villagers to go around and gather details for health information on primarily prenatal and postnatal patients. So keeping track of the birth rates of the mothers to see if they're coming in to get checked up, because there's a really low compliance when it comes to checking out for prenatal and antenatal care, which results in a lot of diseases and a lot of, sadly, problems with children that can lead to death. So just a few pictures that I took there, and then a couple clinic rooms in those outposts. This was another government-run daycare center in that same village. It was probably the nicest building that I saw in the village, in the top left. Nice walkway. Pretty much all of the walkways that I saw used this kind of triangular pattern. And it's interesting because I saw where they were made, and everything in this entire area is actually self-sufficient. They pull on each other. They built this entire network where the farmers who get milk provide milk for the people who do the medical and who do the infrastructure. And then they in turn will provide the facilities for the milk. And it's just a whole collaboration, cooperation that feeds off itself. On the bottom left and right are pictures of essentially it's another antenatal, prenatal clinic right next to an elementary school, which we visited. which I have a video of. So when they would have the assemblies of the boys and girls, the boys would sit on one side, girls would sit on the other side, and the doctors would come and give them things like how to brush their teeth, how to wash their hands because waterborne diseases are a major thing. Well, the girls were taken off to get some education by themselves in another room, and so my friend here, he's a physiotherapist, his name is Abhijit, he called them up to sing songs or to tell a joke just to kind of keep the kids involved while they were waiting for the others, for the girls to come back and continue on with the assembly. So I also got to go to a couple different locations as part of the rural health program. One of them was in a larger city, well, it's a small city. It's called Ahmednagar. It was the smaller city close to where I was. However, that small city had 5 million people. And then I also got to go to a different city, I can't remember the name of it, but they have, again, another sex trafficking establishment for getting women out who want to get out. And because they want to get out of this trade, they need to learn something else, because that's essentially their trade, what they've learned to do, and no one will employ them. And so they've started some different organizations which have continued on by themselves and partnered with other small organizations to get these women skills like needlework, how to sew and how to seam. They actually, in the room next door, have a bunch of computers for them to learn how to code and how to do other computer programming things to give them the skills that they need in order to get out of that trade and make a living, because otherwise they just go back to that since they have no money and no way to make any money or get any food. In the top right and the bottom left, and actually the bottom right as well, are some HIV screening camps that we would go out to. They'd have essentially migrant workers who were the hardest population to reach because they don't have doctors or access at their home since they're only there part of the year, and they don't have access to hospitals where they're working since they're not legally citizens. And so as part of the health program, we'd go out and we would give them HIV screening tests so that if they had it, they would then write them a prescription. Essentially, it's a card that says, you can come to our hospital and get treatment for free. And that's one of the great things about healthcare in India is it is free, but if it's public healthcare, it's not going to be as good. It's going to be really hard to get in because everyone uses it. If it's private, it's very expensive. So the non-governmental organization which I worked with actually is nice in between, where they will provide services for free to those who can't afford it. They will provide services very cheap for those who can kind of afford it, and then they have higher services for those who can pay. So just 3 different locations that we went to. One of them was actually in a really nice hotel and a nice restaurant, and I was surprised that we would need to go there, but it's mainly migrant workers working in those jobs. This is probably the most beautiful campus that I went to. This is the Rural Health Outpost at Bandaldara. This was about a 2.5 hour bus ride out into the countryside, which still, countryside people everywhere. Farms, they were larger farms, but there were still people everywhere. You can't go anywhere in India and get away from people, so you better learn to buddy up. And it was very beautiful. Actually, this region is the region that provides the water for the entire area for where I was posted, because it's a rain shadow area, so it gets no rain. It's very dry, which is nice for me because I'm from Montana and we don't have a lot of humidity, and coming out of the airport in Mumbai felt like I was walking into a sauna. So coming here was a lot nicer, but this area, because it's so wet, when it was occupied by the British, they actually built a large dam in order to cause irrigation to come out and provide water for the rest of the area. So we went up here for a ceremony for actually a rural health motorbike ambulance inauguration, which is the idea of the administrator of the Center for Social Medicine's program. He came up with the idea, which I thought was funny because I came up with that idea in a class just prior to going over there. So I thought, wow, I guess no idea is new under the sun. Under the sun, huh? Come out same ideas in the opposite sides of the world for similar problems. It rained while I was there. And they said I was lucky because it didn't last for long, even though it was about half an hour of a downpour. And we had just gotten back, because I went out and went on a walk with one of the doctors who came with, taking some pictures of the dam, which I'll show you in a minute. And we got back just before it just started to pour, so it was good timing. So there's a lot of British influence, obviously, carries over. One of them is tea. They love their tea. They take at least 2 breaks during the day, regardless of where you are or what you're doing. 10 a.m. and then about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Everyone sits down and takes tea. And patients don't come in, people don't work. They just sit down, oh, here, have some tea. If you ever go anywhere, if you're ever a visitor, which I was at a lot of places, I drank more tea than I wanted to. Because you're a visitor, you're a guest, they offer you tea, they offer you biscuits, and the tea isn't like tea here. You get a chai tea over at, say the place on campus or Liquid Planet. Tipu's chai is probably the closest that I thought it would be, but really it's not. If you get the sweet chai, like the Mumbai chai, with a lot of sugar in it, that's tame compared to this. They like their tea with their sugar. And in the north, it's even worse. They have a dish that I heard is actually on the menu, where they put, the name of it means spoon stand straight. Describes how much sugar is in the tea. So this is the first primary school that Pravara created, the original campus, which was initially just for boys but has become a co-ed campus as well. Girls have separate dormitories. On the right is a picture of the British Dam, which it was just a lush green. The color, the vibrancy of the green, it doesn't even show through on the pictures. The bottom left is from a Catholic, I wouldn't say nunnery, but it's essentially what was there to provide health services for the people before the Pravara Institute came in. They provided most of the health care, but since Pravara came in, they have much better services. They have one older doctor, very old doctor, and I believe 3 nuns who help, who are nurses, and they barely get anyone to come in, except for superstitious patients who don't want to go to the main hospital. And then this is another school which was built by the British in the bottom middle, and it was just all brick, really beautiful, and they actually have multi-ability people educated at this institution, where they actually had a teacher who was blind, and he was teaching all the other blind students. He had gone through all the grades, he'd gone on to higher education, got his teaching degree, and came back and taught for this school. And he was there, and they played us music. They're actually really good. And then also they had a Catholic church that we visited in the town nearby. So there's a lot of British influence among the entire country that I visited anyway. This is the dam. And this was a tame water flow, apparently. They actually open up most of this when it's really the rainy season. And I was lucky to be there when it didn't actually hit. It moves up from the south, and I got out right after it started hitting. We got one cloud burst while I was there. It was a lot of rain. There was rivers running down the street, and my feet got very wet. So another part of my internship was actually hospital postings. Clinical rotations, sadly couldn't take a whole lot of pictures because some of them were not appropriate to take if you were looking at it from an American standpoint. They were very liberal about, oh no, you can take pictures, you can look at all these things, all the records and everything. Here, help us with this surgery. No, thank you, I'm not qualified to do that. And actually the first and only surgery I have attended was in one of my first postings in the orthopedic ward. This doctor up here, he was actually leaving the week that I was posted there. He'd actually grown up in Pravara, gone up through all the education, got to there, and had been working there for, I believe, over 10 years. And he was going to start his own practice, I believe, or join in with a larger practice in Mumbai. But just prior to that, he was doing some surgeries. This young boy actually was one of his last patients. He was sad to leave him because he couldn't get to see him completely recover through the process, but he had CTV, which is congenital talipes equinus varus, which is club feet. And there's a lot of kids who have club feet, and their process for fixing that is not the external cast like we have in internal surgery. They actually do external fixation, where they put rods through the bone, and then they adjust the rods by a couple millimeters every day. And so the doctor sees the kids every day. The kids were so happy to see him. Even though he caused them pain, they were so happy to see him. It was really, really sweet kids. There was another girl who had just one that he was working on. And the surgeries I went to removed those rods, the ones in the girl's foot, and then a hip replacement in an elderly man. And he had me suit up and everything and stand right there next to him. So awesome initiation experience for surgery. I didn't get to stand back, but he wanted me to be there so that I could see everything. Not participate because like, no, I can't do that, but to be right up there and to be able to see everything. That was the scrubs that I got in right before going in. I thought this was cool because on campus they have palm trees that they're planting, and you can see the progression from small to growing larger. It's a picture on top of one of the hospital buildings. Bottom left is a girls' education institution, just specifically for girls. Girls only. It's a lot cleaner and nicer looking than the boys' one was. Bottom right is a picture of a small X-ray or a small photography machine that dentists use to get cavities. Got sick twice while I was over there. Luckily, I was on hospital grounds. It was ironically after I traveled to a major city both times, and I got back, woke up middle of the night, completely dehydrated, terrible migraine, aches, cramps, everything. Got some kind of gastrointestinal disease and had to go in 2 times. This was, I believe, the first time I went in. The second time was a little more traumatic. The nurse didn't do so well on the IV. But, interesting thing, I got totally separated from everything in this room because they put me in these special rooms, which are the rooms for the people who pay. But the thing is, there's no Wi-Fi and there's no cell signal in these special rooms because all the buildings are built out of brick and out of plaster and rock, and so signal does not travel very far. A major aspect of my posting, since I am planning to go on to physical therapy and chiropractic, was the physiotherapy department. So I made most of my friends and I'm still in communication with them. So one of the best things about traveling abroad, especially internship, you get to meet some friends who are actually interested in being your friend because it's a collaborative and a career type connection. And they were all so happy to ask me every question about everything I did not know and say, oh, what about this and what about this? And exchange knowledge. I had a lot of great talks with some of the professors there. On the top left is a picture of the child physiotherapy. They call it PEDS, pediatric physical therapy. Generally, only women will go for that. There were some male students, as you can see in the background. Got to work with all kinds of kids with hypotonia, dystonia, mainly congenital diseases where they don't develop properly, and so they need muscular treatment in order for their bodies to be able to develop and so that they can start walking, because most of the kids who come in can't walk or oftentimes sit up without getting physiotherapy treatment. On top right is community physiotherapy, and it was really cool because all these pictures are of the new building, and they used to be in the basement of the old building, and I got to be there when they finished building the whole thing and transitioning, so I got to see where they came from and where they went to. This is a lot nicer, and it's a lot more sunny because basement to 4th floor of a new building, they made it a lot better for their patients. They had different older styles of treatment. The bottom left is essentially an electro stim machine. So in America, they have these little pads that you stick on. Well, they can't afford those pads because they throw those away, and so they just have these paddles which they tape on with the white tape, what do they call it? Painter's tape. They just tape that on with some gauze and some gel so that they can get the electrical stimulation. And then some patients getting, it's called shortwave diathermy in the bottom right, which was only used at this clinic, and everywhere else in India apparently banned it because it didn't work. Not that it was dangerous, it was just ineffective, but they did it so that the patients felt like they got their money's worth from visiting, because moving joints around, they thought, I'm not getting, it's not worth it to come here. Why should I pay for this? But if they put them on a pad, then they feel like they've gotten doctor treatment. Some more pictures of the clinic. I got to work with the spinal rehab department and a couple patients who, this is towards the end of my internship, I learned a little bit of the local language called Marathi, just enough where I could barely understand what they were saying and they could barely understand what I was saying. But it was nice because these two guys were really go-getters. The man in the bottom left actually had an injury that kept him from just about using his legs at all, but within, I believe it was 5 weeks, he was to the point where he could almost be walking by himself. And it was amazing progress, and I could tell it was all because of his personality. Really nice people. There was a birthday party for the department head. Her name is Deepali Ma'am. And so they threw her a birthday party, and they bought her a big office chair, and she wouldn't accept it, but then they made her accept it. So this is the first rain that I experienced while there. It was actually while we were driving.
What happened?
So I did get to travel a little bit while I was over there. It wasn't all internship, though generally speaking, it was a Monday through Saturday afternoon internship. So instead of the Monday through Friday, we were given, because we were international students, a little bit more leeway. It was myself and one other student from Washington who got to go. They wouldn't send us over with less than 2 people. So up until right at the end, it was unsure of whether or not we were going to get to go, because if one of us backed out, then the other one couldn't go. So whether or not we got to go was really a last-minute thing that we found out probably within a month or less prior. So I actually got to go to a theater while I was there. I wouldn't have expected there to be a movie theater in the village that I was at, but there were 2. This was the most popular one. We watched a movie called Parmanu. It's a Hindi movie, which had more English in it than I was expecting. No subtitles. I was barely able to follow along. Entertaining for sure, but the theater had pretty nice seats regardless. This bottom left was a bus which I did not get to ride in. I thought it was. I was going to travel to the nearest big city where I actually had some friends. It's called Pune, 25 million people, so 25 times the population of Montana in one city. And I was going to take the AC bus, which is more expensive but more reliable. But it wasn't more reliable because they decided that there wasn't enough people taking the bus, so they stopped doing the route. So it almost confounded my trip, but then one of the students at the hospital was actually going to the same city. And so she's like, oh yeah, I can help you, which is vital because I rode on the regular buses, which are packed. People are obviously shorter than me because when I sat in the seats, it was pushing up against my legs. No shocks at all. And if you have ever driven on like a backcountry road that hasn't been serviced in a long time, where there's big potholes and rocks and speed bumps and other things. That was what the roads were like in India. So riding around, I probably flew off my seat about a foot at least 15 times while riding on the buses over there. But it was totally confusing. I had no idea how I would have gotten there if she hadn't have been there showing me how to transfer from this bus to go over here and then get off of that. Because if you don't, you'll go to this other place, and then I would have no idea, because a lot of people can't even read the signs there, since Hindi and Marathi are very close in their written form, but they don't mean the same things a lot of the times. So a lot of people who can speak Hindi can't read the Marathi. A lot of people who speak Marathi can barely read the Hindi, even though it's a local and national languages. It's not necessarily spoken in the rural parts. Oh, one last thing. I did get to ride on a nice bus on the way back. It was a sleeper bus, so essentially the bus on the bottom left, except 2 stacks and their beds. So I got to ride on that. No, the TV screen did not work. Picture on the left is part of my dormitories. As I was explaining earlier, it's just open to the weather. So my room was also open to the weather. In the middle and on the right, I got to travel a little bit. This middle picture was really impressive because it took 500 years, I believe, of constant work. It was about 5 to 10, I think it was about 8 generations straight that worked to carve this out by hand. This was a Buddhist temple, one of the largest Buddhist temples. It was really huge, spectacular, really wonderful, wonderful architecture and artwork. And in comparison, on the top right is a British architecture that was only about 75, 100 years old, compared to one that was over, I believe it was 1,000, 1,200 years old. The British one did not last as long. Bottom right is a picture of a storefront in the city of Pune, where I got to visit a few times. Top left is the corridor down to my room, which is at the very end there. Sometimes the lock didn't work. There were many geckos in that room. Large ones too, that big. Bottom left is actually the first dish that I got to eat when I flew into India. That was a story in itself. I flew down, got into Mumbai at about 1 a.m., walked out of the doors for the airport where there were guards standing with AK-47s to hit a wall of humidity. It was very hot. I hadn't slept in probably 21 hours or longer because the flight was cramped, and I got an aisle seat, and it smelled like Indian food. And I was nauseous from the malaria medicine that I took. Learn to take that at the evening time before you go to bed. So, pro tips. Got into the airport, got out, and my ride was not there. And I had no way to contact them because my phone didn't work in India. I couldn't go back into the airport because I had exited the airport. So I couldn't go back in to see about getting a phone card, and there was no Wi-Fi. And eventually I got a message to one of the guards who went and found the phone guy, who came in about half an hour later, said, well, I can get you one, but it's going to take 24 hours for it to activate. Okay, well, I guess I'm just waiting. He said, well, you can use my phone. Lifesaver. I called my ride. He says, yeah, we're late. We'll be there in like 30 minutes. Finally shows up. It was the guy in the other video who was talking. He said, whoa, what happened? He spoke very little English, but it was very, very funny. One of the funniest people I've met. My first dish was dosa, which is a rice flour thin cake, which is from the south. Because I was right in the middle, essentially parallel with Mumbai, I got tastes of both cultures, the northern culture and the southern, which southern has lots of coffee, northern has no coffee. So I'm glad I was in the middle because I got coffee. The middle picture is part of the Ellora Caves, where I got to go and visit. And this was built so that it magnifies. It's like an amplifier. So if you sing into it at a specific angle, it amplifies your voice. And they would use it for Buddhist chants. And we didn't have a guide because the guide cost like $50. But a group, we did have a guide, came in right next to us. So, well, we'll just maybe hang out here and look at the architecture. Well, he shows them how it works. And so he sang into it, and it was pretty cool. On the right is a picture out of my friend's fifth-story window in Pune. Very beautiful city, very moderate temperature, most pleasant place that I visited. Had some food while I was over there. I was surprised to find that in my little village they had pizza. Is Indian pizza. It's very different, very unique, but also good, and volcano brownies. And I did get to try burger there, even though burger is illegal in India. There are places that don't serve hamburger, they don't serve beef, they serve buffalo. And because it's termed buffalo, it's not sacred. Essentially, it's the, I believe it's the male. The female is regarded as holy, but the male is like, oh, you eat him, that's fine. So I did get one burger while I was in India, which is very nice because otherwise it was vegetarian or chicken. The top middle is the restaurant where I got sick both times. It was the only same factor in my 2 trips that seemed to correspond. So even though it was the nicest place along it was the nicest rest stop between the cities where I was traveling, apparently not the cleanest. Top right is a pool that we got to visit in Ahmednagar, where in the bottom middle is a small replication of the Taj Mahal. It's called Bibi Ka Maqbara, and it was because, I can't remember the whole story, but one of the princes who was related to the man who built the Taj Mahal left and was grieved that he left because he missed it so much, and so he built a scale replica to commemorate his dead wife or something, I believe. If you go inside, there's a sarcophagus, or essentially a tomb that down below where people just throw money. So there was probably feet of money down below, which is used to maintain the premises, which is not well maintained. Bottom left was the largest mall that I've ever visited, called the Phoenix Mall, which was in Pune. And bottom right was some more pictures from the Ellora Caves. So I couldn't have been able to go on this journey, and I didn't even touch 1% of it. But how can you touch a 3-month internship in 1 hour or less without the help of the Ben Gilman Scholarship, Frankie Global Leadership Initiative, GoFundMe, not very much because I don't know rich people, and then friends and family. But the Ben Gilman Scholarship was really an awesome scholarship, which I had no idea about. I was initially going to try to do study abroad, but I could find no help. I tried to go over to the study abroad office, and it seemed that they were too busy, and then somebody quit, and then there was nobody to talk to. So I got lost for a while and thought, well, I'm not going to go abroad. But then Kevin came into one of my classes and said, well, have you ever thought about interning abroad? If you have, come visit me in the Davidson Honors College. So, well, I might take a look at that, since my involvement with the Frankie Global Leadership Initiative gives me also incentive to go and study abroad beyond the classroom experience to get more public health or your choice awareness. And so the Ben Gilman allowed me to, since I don't have money, as a lot of students don't have, if you can receive federal financial aid, you can actually apply for this, and it's a 1 in 3. And they look for people from places like very conservative Montana and very undiverse Montana who doesn't know anything about anyone else outside of the Montana border to go send them abroad. And they say, hey, we'll give you up to $5,000 to go do some experience. And so I just worked with the Writing Center on campus and Laura Pengelly Drake, and I worked with her and Kevin to apply for this scholarship. Got the award of, I believe it was $4,800, which covered for half of the expense of my internship, which is over $10,000. And then the Frankie GLI also provided me another $4,200 to go. I got some local support, a couple $100 on GoFundMe, but for those who know more people, you can do more on GoFundMe. But I was really hoping to give more of an impact, and I hope that the recording of this will allow the dissemination of the information that there are a lot of awesome opportunities and awesome financial opportunities available for students to be able to go study abroad, especially with Ben Gilman. I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. Funny thing, I had to commit to my internship before I knew I had the money, which meant that if I had to back out, I would owe them, I believe, $2,000. So it was a risky business, but sometimes you just have to step out in faith for those things which, would really benefit you. And it has been a life-changing experience. I came back. As soon as I got back to the U.S., I thought, wow, where's everybody? There's nobody here. And time in India is much different than time in the U.S. Here it's, you get there, clock in at your job at 9, clock out at 5. If you're talking with someone but you have a meeting to get to, you cut your talk short with them and you go to the meeting and you're there early, if nothing else. But in India, it's, it'll happen, things will come along, it'll all be fine eventually. They start work at 9 o'clock, which is actually 9:30. They end work early. Funny thing, they get there late, but they end early. Just very relaxed. It's more about the culture. It's more about the people, about family, relationships, than it is about we need to get this done, we need to get this done, we need to get this done. Even though they emulate the U.S. and Western cultures very much, to a great extent, they still have that very much Indian flavor to everything. And the diversity and the crazy hecticness that is India. If you look at any videos about crossing the street in India, true, don't stop. You've got to keep walking, otherwise you will get hit because they won't stop for you. You have to find the gap in between. And this is the final picture of Bandaldara, the most green place I got to visit. That's actually the tallest peak in Maharashtra, and a lot of people would go hiking that. But while I was there, it was towards the end of the summer and monsoon season. So temperatures went down, storms went up, and it was more dangerous to go hiking. But I was really privileged to be able to go over and visit, to live there for 3 months, to grow and to change and to bring it back with me. Thank you.
Questions for John?
I have lots of questions.
Go ahead, Tony.
What part of India, I don't know this state, what part of India?
So
Central or?
Maharashtra is the state, or rather the province, which houses Mumbai. Mumbai is pretty much halfway down the continent on the western coast, and I was 5 hours east, inland.
Your pictures of where you're traveling look very clean compared to the India that I've seen, which is anything but clean.
Yeah, so I think it was partially because I was in rural area, so less people means less trash, but proportionate trash. So there was definitely garbage all over. It was not a very clean place. So if you do go, don't expect pristine places like you see in pictures, even some of my pictures. I think I have some pictures of that, but I did want to capture the beauty of India as well, since everyone knows that it is dirty, and they know that it is dirty, and they're trying to work on it. There was trash, along the sides of the road, everywhere that you went. The hospital where I was actually probably one of the cleanest places. That and the malls. The malls were very clean on the inside. But yeah, it was, I took over 1,000 pictures, and obviously I can't show you 1,000 pictures, so.
Another question. From this experience, what have you gained with this experience that you bring back to the United States in your work in physical therapy?
Well, one of the main things would be how to communicate with people, actually with people. In the U.S., medicine has become more of you're a number and an insurance claim, whereas in India, there's not really insurance, and we treat the person. They treat holistically. I actually have a chiropractor who is my chiropractor, and I've been able to shadow with him. And he went over to India as well to do some practice for 3 months after he got his doctor of chiropractic. Kind of spurred me a little bit in that direction as well. But being able to address people holistically, because we are more holistic beings. We're not just, a paycheck and a body. We're people, and each one of us is a person. And being able to identify and address those things which are difficult for people to acknowledge, because when you're in an area where everything is just exaggerated, there's so many people, there's so many problems, the drasticness of everything I saw, patients would come in at the very end stages of whatever disease they have because, it wasn't worth it to come take care of it early. So all the pictures you see in textbooks of, this is a crazy disease, that was commonplace in India. And so being able to see things as they came to a fruition, I can see kind of the start of this in people where people are super stressed. How do you deal with that? You don't ignore it like we do in the US. You don't get a pill for it. You talk with people, and you acknowledge it. And so kind of bringing back that aspect of how to communicate with people on a personal basis as a person.
My question is how you felt coming back and sort of what kind of time period it took you to readjust being back in Montana.
Well, coming back, I was very happy to come back. As I mentioned earlier, I got sick twice. Once was at the beginning, once was at the end of my internship. Nice little bookends to it. But coming back, it was relieving to be home. But it was also it was kind of a shock because I got to see very blatantly a lot of the things that are wrong with our institutions, with our infrastructure, with the way that we run things, where it's all about money, it's all about progress, it's all about essentially everything but people. And so coming back to a place where there's so few people and nobody wants to talk with anyone else. Everyone looks at their phones. Everyone actively avoids looking at you. I would, whenever I smiled at somebody there, so they're walking around, of course, staring at me because I'm white and bald. And initially, I felt kind of offended when I went over there. They're looking at that. That's not right. They're just curious. These people are rural, and they probably have never seen a white person like me before. And so I would smile at them, and it would just lighten up their day. And then they'd start telling their friends, you see, he smiled at me. I was essentially a movie star. We went, let me tell you one quick story. This is just a difference in dynamics between engaging with people and engaging with technology. In India, phones are a big thing, right? Everyone has phones just like us. They're all about selfies, though, right? We used to be about selfies 10, 15 years ago. They're still stuck in that. But it's much more deep for them because they're family roots, people-oriented. Most of the pictures I saw, people are like selfie stick, phones, groups of people. We went on a little trek up to a British fort, which took us an hour and a half to get up to the top. Really pretty. I didn't put any pictures in here because it just doesn't capture the scale. But it was a tourist spot. No tourists, all Indian. Local tourists. But as we were climbing up, the focus changed from, Daulatabad Fort, which is the name of the place if you want to look it up, Daulatabad, D-A-U-L, Atabad. And it turned into, we were coming here to look at the fort to, there's some white people. And everybody that we came across wanted to take a selfie with us. You take a selfie? Can take a selfie? No. I say yes to you, I say yes to the mountain. Everyone will want to take a selfie. And luckily, we ran into a student, an engineering student, who was there from Mumbai visiting, and his name happened to be Abhijit. And he was one of the only people who didn't ask us for a selfie. And so we were hiking up at the same time, and we ended up just hiking up together, and he helped so much because he kept telling people, no selfies, no, go away, leave them alone. They're just here to visit too. But that was probably one of the biggest things was isolation. It was nice to be quiet. It was nice to have quietness. We're really privileged with that, but we're not privileged with our lack of connection to other people.
You might not want to answer this, but I'm kind of curious. You got so sick that you were in hospital with dehydration. Is it a different kind of bacteria? Or?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds. I mean, you go to anywhere in the world, you're going to have different local bacterias. I drank only bottled water pretty much exclusively, but some of the food, because it's prepared, possibly with unwashed hands, possibly with unclean water, you can't always battle that off, especially if you're dehydrated. And when I initially went there, it was 104 degrees every day. And I drank 4 liters of water and felt dehydrated. So not getting enough water consistently, sometimes not having access to the water because of I was traveling and I only brought 1 water bottle with me and there's no good water sources. I was surprised I got sick the second time because I'd been really careful. But it was mainly just a compound factor of I'm not used to that kind of weather, being from Montana. I'm not used to that kind of food, being all or mostly vegetarian and all spices. If you eat Indian food here, just think of that, but more diverse and more spice. Like not necessarily hot, I deal with hot pretty well, but just a load of spice, you end up smelling like it. True story too. I found out that like after a week of being, I'm like, what's that smell? No one's, that's me. I smell like the spice, just because it exudes from your pores, which is why the airplane smelled like spices too. But generally, I was pretty well, other than those 2 times.
I was curious about the migrant workers you talked about they did outreach with. Are they like intra-Indian, are they coming from different states, or were they, like traditionally migratory peoples, or
From different countries.
Were they from other countries? What was their status?
The majority were intra-Indian, coming from different states where they have maybe a little bit less economic ability, or even just different provinces. It wasn't necessarily like they traveled a long way. For them it'd be a long way since they are on with a cow and cart or walking, but the healthcare system is not like it is here. You don't have like a digital register of, oh, you're this person. They're working on that, and different organizations are. But a lot of them are just more kind of local Indian. Some of them are from, I can't remember, it is a country just bordering India. Not Sri Lanka.
Bangladesh?
Yes, Bangladesh. But they can't tell the difference. They don't have any ID. They have no way to tell them that, oh, you're not Indian, and they look the same, and they act very much the same. But because there's that, oh, well, we don't know who's from where or really what they're doing, they're approached with a lot of caution, and a lot of times they're just put under the table, saying, oh, well, you're here to do work, we're going to pay you very little because you can't prove anything. So they have it really hard. Even though they have no other way to work and no other way to make a living. A lot of them are subsistence farmers who've lost their land. So they have to go migrate and work for someone else.
So most of your pictures are places and rain and things like that. How many hours did you put in terms of your actual internship, would you say? And how rewarding is that?
Internship, over 450 hours, probably. I met the criteria for the 300-hour minimum within the first 7 weeks, and I was there for 13. So I was there 13 weeks with essentially 8 hours a day, in addition to just cultural learning with hanging out with the doctors and the other people afterwards. But yeah, probably close to 450 hours just doing internship. Most of it was observation since it was actually a hospital. I didn't have the ability, like I would have been okay doing it by their laws, but if I had engaged in something over there, it would be considered malpractice over here. So I had to abide by a different set of rules.
And a follow-up question to that is, you and I have talked about this in the past. I think they're interested in having other people follow in your footsteps. Is that a realistic possibility, and would you recommend it to students who are low public health minors, but maybe not in physical therapy like you are?
Yeah, they definitely have a major desire to have other students come. They're working currently with and I got to be there for the first exchange of students, or the first batch of students from Worcester University, England. They're trying to make more international counterparts to be able to get other students to come in. And it's not just because the Center for Social Medicine is housed in the Provar Medical Institution. It's not just medicine. They have an engineering place, engineering school, they have a medical school, they have an agricultural school. It's really very diverse, and I mean, I would recommend anyone, like my internee, she was an anthropology major. And so just having anything to do with people, anything to do with conservation, land, management, medicine, would really be interested in going over there, because you'd learn a lot. It's totally different than the US, and it's essentially ground level work. They have a lot of students who come over and do research projects. They have a collaboration with Sweden. What's the name of it? Can't remember. University in Sweden.
Stockholm?
Karolinska.
Oh, yes.
Karolinska College, Denmark, I think it was. So they have a collaboration with them. The main, I can't think of the word, the guy in charge of the Center for Social Medicine was really interested, and he's saying, hey, go back to your university and try to set up like an exchange program with us. Like, we want more students. We really want a lot more students. They're no longer going to be doing anything during the summer because it gets up to 140 during the summer. So they had a batch of interns that I overlapped with a little bit, and they got heat stroke a few times. But they're not going to be doing it there. They'll be doing it during the more moderate times of the year. But it was well worth it. They were some of the nicest people I've ever met.
So Kevin, do we still have possibilities through IE3 there directly? Is it ongoing every year, or is it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Joseph went out on a program named IE3 Global, which is housed in Oregon, but UM is a member, and if you're looking for credit, it's not a bad deal because there's a tuition waiver. I can't believe the university hasn't taken that away from us. But don't tell anybody about it. But if you do need credit, going through IE3 might be a good idea. And the other thing you can always do is contact the School for Social Medicine directly, and you might be able to save some money, particularly if you didn't need credit. Joseph, I think you got quite a bit of credit for this.
Yeah, I got 12 credits for doing the internship, 6 through Davidson Honors College and 6 through my major. Didn't have to pay anything extra for it, which is nice. And it was all set up really easy to do. One reason why I did it.
A question about livestock and wildlife. Was that prevalent? It doesn't seem like a lot of pictures show fencing and whatnot.
No, if you consider dogs wildlife, there were wildlife everywhere. One of them kind of tried to attack me once, and I knew that it was going to. It's really weird because it was just, he'd had a bad day. You could tell. He was like, I'm looking for someone to take this out on. He saw me, and he's like, you're different, and came out and charged after me. There were actually quite a bit of wildlife. The campus where I was at was originally in a forest, jungle, you could say. And not long before I came, they actually had a couple of hyenas come into campus, and they had to try to get them out and call, people who could help with that, animal control, as it were, but they kind of just had to wait for them to chuckle themselves out. But have you ever heard that bird that's like, in the movies? Where it's like, oh, this is some really weird, far off jungle place. Came out of my building that I was staying in, and walking down the street, I hear that. I thought, I'm in a movie. I didn't know I was in a movie. But that specific bird, and I thought that was one of the coolest things, because like you think, you watch all these movies, you're like, well, that's not how it is, But then to have that kind of connection, it sank in a little bit for me when it had that, oh, I'm kind of familiar with that, I didn't know that this is where they got that from. There was lots of vegetation. There were fences, such as around the institute. They had a big, mortar, cement walls, and at the top of those walls they would put broken glass so that people couldn't climb over the walls and get in. And there were fences everywhere and guards everywhere. But still, animals are animals. They'll go wherever they want to go, especially the dogs. That was the most animals that I saw.
How about cows?
The cows were stuck up. The road was theirs. They knew no one was going to mess with them. So they would just saunter on into the middle of the road when there's traffic going both ways and cars everywhere. And you'd have to stop or go around because the cows don't care. So yes, there were cows everywhere. A local breed, which is the ones that they consider holy, very different looking than the cows, Western cows, really large heads, big curved horns. But yeah, there are cows everywhere, just wandering aimlessly, eating garbage.
Okay, last questions for Joe? If not, I want to thank him from the bottom of my heart for really having the courage to do this amazing internship, learn so much from it, and be able to use that in the rest of his career going forward. So
Do you want to go back?
Yes and no. India is so diverse that I got to see at the biggest scale, 1/29th of the culture, because wherever you go, you can go to a different province, and if you're from one province locally, you don't know what they're saying because they each have a different language. So yes, I would like to go back in that aspect. Not for as long, for sure, because it was very challenging the first time. But being prepared, I think it makes a big difference.
So, okay.
Can you step out here just so I can see your full costume? Can you explain that?
So this is one of the traditional Indian formal clothes that they wear. This is the kind of semi-formal. The formal ones are all beaded up in gold and silver looking, and wide variety of prices for those. This one I paid about $50 US for. This is called a kurta, and this is a, let's see. I had it, it sounds like an Egyptian word, but it's not. And I should have said it at the beginning because I remembered it then. Nehru. Nehru. But you can wear just the one without the vest. But I got this because the Indian Independence Day was coming and I had nothing to wear for it. So I got this on one of my trips to the big city.
Okay, so we're going to give Joe a round of applause. So next week we have a little change in our schedule because Ben, who was going to come here from Zambia, was not able to make the trip. But fortunately, one of the members of the External Advisory Committee, Michelle Sayre, who is the organizer of Nurses to Nurses International, is going to fill in. And she's going to talk about Haiti. So that's what's on tap for next Wednesday. See you then.